Hello, I'm Ingrid Weisheitinger and welcome to Steps to Success. Today we're going to practice to conjugate the following present regular verbs in the first, second, and third person. There are some rules that you need to follow. So let's take a look at the rules. Rules to follow. A. I is used in the first person. B. He, she, and it are used in the third person. And C. You, we, and they are used in the second person. So let's take a look at the first example. In number 1, it has been done for you. The verb is beg. So the word I is in the first person, I beg. In the third person, we're going to see a pattern happening. He begs. We add an S to the verb. She begs. There is the S in the verb. And it begs. There's an S in begs. However, when we go to the second person, you will see you beg, we beg, they beg. So we only add an S when we are working in the third person, which would be in he, she, and it. Okay, so now let's try one together. In number 2, we're going to use the verb boil. So, in the first person, I'm going to use I. And as in the example before, boil would just be the verb. I boil. Now we're going to use the third person. If you remember the rule, we are going to add an S to the verb. So we would start with he boils. And the next one would be she boils. And the last third person would be it boils. So again, in the first person, we just use the verb. We don't add an S. I boil. In the third person, we add the S. He boils, she boils, it boils. Now let's go to the second person. We're going to use you, and it goes back to the regular verb, boil. You boil, we boil, and they boil. So again, let's revisit. In the first person, I boil. In the third person, he boils, she boils, it boils. And in the second person, you boil. We boil, they boil. Okay? Let's try number 3 together. And we're going to use the verb bake. Again, in the first person, I bake. Again, we just use the verb in the present tense. I bake. But in the third person, we're going to have to, do you remember? We add an S. He bakes. He bakes. She bakes. and it bakes. And now when we go back to second person, we're going to use you, and we go back to just the regular verb. You bake. We bake. And they bake. Very good. So again, we could revisit the verb bake. In the first person, I bake. In the third person, we have he bakes, she bakes, it bakes. And in the second person, we have you bake, we bake, and they bake. Let's try another one. And in this exercise, we're going to use the verb help. So again, in the first person, I'm going to use I. And if you're catching on to the pattern, we know that we just use the present verb, help. I help. Then in the third person, we need to follow the rule and add the S. He helps. She helps. And it helps. And then again, in the second person, we do not add the S. We go back to the regular verb. For you help. We help. And they help. So, as you can see, there is a pattern again. I help is in the first person. He helps. She helps. It helps are all in the third person. You help. We help. And they help is in the second person. Okay, so now we're going to practice number 5 with the verb camp. So again, in the first person, I camp. And you could see again, it's just the verb in the present tense. I do not add an S. But here's the third person. Again, we always add the S. He camps. He camps. She camps. And it camps. So again, you could see the pattern. We add an S for he, she, and it. It's he camps, she camps, it camps. But then we go back to the second person and we have you camp. We do not add the S. So we just use the present verb. You camp. We camp. And they camp. So again, let's revisit. I camp. He camps. She camps. It camps. You camp. We camp. They camp. Good. Now it's your turn to continue your practice with the following exercises. And remember, the objective of today's lesson is to conjugate regular present verbs. And so you could continue with the exercises, and you could also use other verbs and continue your practice using your pronunciation and the skill that you learned today with the first person, the third person, and the second person.